Hello and welcome to another edition of Magus Talk. Do we have an episode for you? If you thought we were sharing occult information up to this point, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. Jay is neck deep in the practice of summoning both angels and Jinn, and he is working with the first Jinn, Baal, and the first angel of the Shemhamephorash, known as the Havael. So he's going to describe his experiences of summoning. He's going to describe how these experiences have affected his life, and he's going to ask a few questions, and I'm going to answer them. It should be known that I had sent Jay some write-ups, about 10 to 15 to 20 pages each, about 4 write-ups, because usually when he asks questions, he's working with the system, and it's being complemented according to the questions he asks. Now, this is done so he gets immediate information as he needs it. And all of this information is grouped together, compiled, and it's going to form the corpus of what this system represents. I already have the general flow of things, essentially, but they are being beta tested, and more than beta tested, because this kind of thing is cultivation based, which means, like any workout, it's cumulative. The effects are cumulative. They build up over time. Now, Jay also addresses this issue in the podcast. He is asking, what's going on? Should you just leave it alone and then come back later and then realize that you've somehow digested everything and it works better? Or should you just keep going and improve as you go along? Because if you don't do it for a while, you kind of lose the ground you've gained. And I answer that question as well. So I won't delay you here. Let's get straight into Jay's thing. The format is the same as before. I'll split up the Jay portion into parts where he addresses specific issues, and I'm going to convey some deep esoteric information regarding this system and general occultism. This is the kind of thing you would get if you had a private consultation with an experienced occultist. You're getting it for free. So take advantage of it. Take notes or just absorb it and see what it's all about in real time. So without further ado, take it away, Jay.
All righty then. Okay. Ari, Tara, hello. Hello, everyone out there in internet land. It's me, Dr. J. Anyway, so an update. Ari, I read what you sent me. Now, you sent me 4 documents. I have read 3 of them about 3 times or so. And the 4th one, the last 2 were about Baal and a Geraz, and because I'm not summoning a Geraz, I didn't bother reading about that guy. I'm just working on summoning Baal. So it had been a while since I summoned the archangels or did the 9 cuts and the organ fusion stuff. But anyway, when I did do it, I don't know exactly what's going on. When I did do the fusion alchemy with the 9 cuts and I powered up the aces with the archangels and the rulers. That first time it came on, pretty strong. I was like, wow, okay. Now, is that because I haven't done it in a while? And when I do that kind of thing every day, do I just kind of absorb it and get used to it? Or is it like other things where you don't do it for a while, you lay off, and then you come back to it and you're like, 20% better because you took a little time off? I'm not really sure where that's coming from, but again...
All right, let me just interrupt you for a second. Think of this as a workout. So you're doing a physical workout, which means you don't just do it once. You have a kind of training regimen. And in this training regimen, if you push yourself too hard, you're going to hurt the next day, or you're going to tear a muscle, or you're going to strain yourself too much. But if you don't have enough, let's say it's a weight training regimen, So if you don't use enough um, resistance, if you don't have enough weights on the barbell, for example, it's not really going to do much. So you want to find a kind of happy medium between maximum resistance, between maximum effort, and downtime. Because, yes, you do need downtime. You can't be doing this 24/7. But at the same time, if you leave too much time in between, your so called psychic muscles, especially at this early stage, are going to forget what they've been doing. Now, this is even more important right now because you haven't fully digested the flow of how this works, um, specifically this particular system, let alone all other occult systems, because for the audience, Jay isn't one of those people who's been studying occultism all his life. He's been doing specific things, and he's mainly into what he has been doing for a large portion of his life was Tai Chi, martial arts, energy work, and spontaneously he's into shamanistic stuff. He has a good psychic sense, earth energies, and so he can sense spirits. He's also good at divination spontaneously. The issue here is that now he's dealing with something more hermetic as far as Western tradition is concerned. Hermetic means that there is a lot of symbolism involved, and this symbolism tells its own story. Now, Jay's going to get into that, the fact that I attempted to weave the symbolism, and not in a story form like an adventure or anything, but in a narrative that could be better understood. Because all of these symbols condensed into tarot card form for the most part, they tell us all we need to know. I do here is not just interpret the symbols as they stand, but weave the cultivation methods within them because they are intertwined. This is where Kabbalah comes in. This is where the cultivation system implied, if not explicitly or implicitly stated in the ancient text known as the Sefer Yetzirah or Book of Creation, and I call it the Manual of Shaping. It it describes a cultivation system that can be expressed through tarot symbolism. In fact, the Rider-Waite tarot deck is specifically modeled after the tree of life, the Hebrew alphabet, and all of this information originates or can be traced back to, I don't know if it originates, but it can be traced back to the Sefer Yetzirah. So, in that way, the symbols are jam packed with meaning. And if you can understand the nuances of that meaning, then you don't need somebody to lay it out. However, it requires the subconscious to digest, to incorporate, to correlate, and this all pairs with the experience of actually stimulating the system, doing the summoning, experiencing the altered states and what they represent. And again, this is a cumulative dynamic. So it's cumulative also because, and it takes time, because it takes time to get into the groove of weaving the interpretations into practice. How do these symbols form a narrative? How does the narrative translate into direct practice? How can practice change, be adapted to conditions in each particular case in order to reflect back into the symbolism and its feedback generate an even deeper narrative? Eventually, it becomes almost instinctive. What it is, this isn't training. Although I likened it to a workout regimen, it's more of an art form because a lot of creativity comes in, but not too much. It needs to be balanced, fine tuned. You need to weave skill with knowledge, with creativity. And often modern occultists don't know how to make that weaving. They begin And so, because they want results and quickly, they go into this sense that, okay, if we follow step by step as they tell us verbatim, we're going to get results. And you always get something, but it may not be what you want, and it may not be to the degree that you want. It may not even be useful or even healthy for you. So, what one learns when one learns esoteric methodology, because occultism is a word that's been demonized. It's the hidden stuff. Well, yeah, because this is, imagine, you don't need money for this, really. You don't need status. You don't need to come from some big family or something or have some kind of innate strength. What you need is your own resourcefulness and some knowledge. The knowledge, however, is only a bunch of signposts that stimulate the innate creativity within you, how to weave together archetypes, how to tap into them, how to do all these perceptions. And the symbols are more or less reservoirs of meaning that stimulate your own innate, almost instinctive abilities. Birds fly, tigers have claws and teeth, fish swim. Human beings have creativity, intellectual creativity, imagination, um, altered states that can weave together meaning through symbology. We have writing, we have speech, we have art. These things are innate in humanity. However, they are potentials and they need to be cultivated, they need to be nurtured. And we have varying degrees of immediacy in our resourcefulness, which we call talent. However, if you are sincerely interested, that means your talent is screaming out to be expressed, unless your motives are misguided. Unless somebody tells you, well, all you want is to have money. So here's a way to make money. So it's a means to an end. But then it becomes a chore. And if you don't do it playfully, but seriously, because play is for children, and adults take play and modify it and mature it, it's still play, but it's not like the child plays. The child discovers how to do things when they play. The adult is actually doing them. So the structure of play becomes mature, becomes a little more serious, but not in the sense of career seriousness or, doing something, oh, that's serious and dour and grave and weighted. So there is a certain artfulness. There is a certain creativity here. And Jay, you're learning this. And you're learning it not through rote practice of, okay, I did 5 push-ups a day, 5 mantras, 10 of these, 10 inhalations. Yeah, there's the 9 cuts that you do. There's the fusion alchemy. All of this is warm-up. So once you get into the warm-up, you move into the altered states, which are generally mild. And they're mild because diving into them too much can create a shock. Once you become accustomed to the altered state, then they can become more intense, open up horizons, deepen, and you will not be overwhelmed. Like I have said in other presentations, we do have what one can call a psychic immune system. Now, for most of us, this is undermined through life, through conditioning, through trauma, through a lot of things. Sometimes we are overprotected and inundated with too much caution and fear against certain things, such as what religion does. And I don't blame it because, yes, there are abuses, there are excesses, and there have been traumatic experiences around these kinds of things. Just like there's traumatic experiences in working out. Oh, I pulled a muscle. Okay, let's ban all the gyms. Let's ban all the exercise, all the weightlifting and stuff because somebody got hurt. Oops. Yeah. Well, no. And you don't, because there are car accidents, you don't ban all automobiles. That's tyranny. And so a certain tyranny has been imposed by certain belief systems against this kind of thing. And the deeper motive is not because somebody wants to protect us or because we're going to hell. The deeper motive is because somebody wants to monopolize the capacities. Let's put it another way, and I'm kind of veering a little bit off topic, but like I said, I will give out some general information here. The Eucharist is a ritual in Christianity where Christians allegedly eat the flesh and drink the blood of Christ. Now, this isn't real blood and this isn't real flesh. This is wine and bread. However, the ritual that one engages, the liturgy in church, is supposed to literally transmute wine and bread into flesh and blood. Now, this flesh and blood, although the transmutation is literal, the flesh and blood is not, because blood is a symbol in ancient times. When they spoke of blood, metaphysically speaking, they meant life force, vitality, and bread is your embodied nature. The body of Christ is essentially the perception capacity you have, your senses, your psychic senses, your higher consciousness. So basically, energy and consciousness. You imbibe the energy and consciousness of the example of Jesus. And this is supposed to be a ritual that would empower the faithful, not just to live their lives accordingly, in not just a moral way, but in a way that's where they have their needs met, where evil cannot touch them, and all of this. But since the beginning, this thing was undermined. And because of the conditions of those times, the Christians had to be severely traumatized through persecution after persecution until they were finally watered down and the Roman establishment or legalized the religion. However, it wasn't what it originally was intended to be, in my honest opinion. Now, that doesn't mean it's worthless. And it also doesn't mean it can't go back to the mysterious nature, the mystery nature of it. Because all of these mysteries, like the Eucharist, which is the biggest one, basically, these kinds of mysteries are innate within us. If you have the true faith, now I am not a Christian in a practicing sense. I am speaking of the esoteric ideology of the religion. Occultists like to bash Christianity, and I will also express some negative views regarding the doctrine as it stands, regarding the institution of the religion. However, this is a cultivation dynamic. It's a belief system that meant to include elements of cultivation. For example, in Ayurvedic medicine, you have a whole bunch of herbs and substances that are put together, but they don't do anything unless there's a focus using chanting certain vibrations, certain meditative states, energy circulation. All of these things modify the substances into something that's far more potent medicinally than they were originally. This is the belief. Now, that's an occult or esoteric interaction with actual physical substances. And this kind of transmutation also occurs with the wine and the bread in the context of the liturgy. You have an infused wine that doesn't just give you a slight alcoholic high, but it will empower you, empower your life force, and almost like you were used and blessed with a personal Jesus actually being there. Your consciousness will reach greater potential for awakening as if the real Jesus was there. That's the intention. That is the esoteric interpretation of this kind of thing. Now, so Jay, this is artfulness that you're learning. And it's very interesting, like you're going to say later in your explanations here, that, or even you already said it, in fact, that you've had successes with the archangels and they were successful first and then you fell flat. Well, that's also like not beginner's luck, but when you get into something, you don't have resistances. You get into it, and before you get in your own way or something gets in your way, you have successes. And what you have is the comparison with nothing. I mean, you haven't done this before. You just started. So the differential between what's going on and what happened before is pretty big. Then you start building a tolerance effect. So as you move on, the tolerance effect ups ups the scale, you might say, ups the ante. So you transform even more, you cultivate even more, you become more artful, as artful as you need to bring it to the point where the tolerance effect has plateaued to a state that is good enough. And then you can build from that. But the thing is, you build to a state where I'm summoning these entities and they have changed my life. I can manifest through them. They reveal this, that, and the other, and they are working on me to deal with other issues around. And the key is that it's not so much the result, it's how all of this comes about. Somebody can just say, well, I'll just take a seminar on manifesting and use the power of affirmations and blah, 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 or I just go to a retreat and meditate. Yeah, sure. But what you get here is a certain artful participation in the process, a certain congress of feedback that you don't get from the more mechanical methods. This is of course Western Solomonic methodology. This is Hermetic methodology. And Hermetic means a boundary condition. It means also exchange, because across the boundaries you would have exchange. Hermes was the god of merchants, Mercury. Mercury and merchant, these words have a common origin. And in ancient Greece, you had the Hermae, which used to be piles of stones between territories. And the different people would exchange goods and services because they knew that, well, I'm not here to attack you. See, I'm sitting next to this pile of stones, or a pillar later on, or a phallic pillar, because Mercury represents a certain vitality. What you're exchanging is goods and services that provide vitality, that keep life going. So it's all to your benefit. Mercury is also, or Hermes is the representation of communication for the same reason, exchange through boundaries. Hermetically sealed means the boundary is closed. So whether it's an open or a closed boundary, Mercury defines it. So Hermetic mysticism has to do with defined situations, has to do not just with secrets and mysteries, but basically it's a symbol based dynamic. It's not just based on doing certain things, representing certain vibrations or doing certain practices. It has to do with the power of symbols and archetypes specifically. So let's see where Jay is going with this.
Anyway, let me just tell you about this first time. The archangels and rulers came on really strong, and I'm like, yeah, and of course they were, I did it the way I normally do it, first the sense organs, then the actual organs, and then there you go. The myth that you created behind the Fool and the High Priestess and the Two of Swords just really rocked, dude. Way to go. Well done. It was just so easy to remember all that, and I didn't have a dream about it, but I bet you I probably did and just don't remember it. I mean, it really got into the subconscious because when I opened the portal, I didn't feel anything, but I'm like going, okay, I know this is working. It has to. The stories were just too cool, and they're just too embedded in my head. And then when I summoned, I can't remember the name, but of that first Shemhamephorash angel, it was up front and center and in my face. It was a gold electric energy, but it was kind of like an adrenaline rush right in my heart. And it was denser, darker than the normal electric gold. It was, I don't know how else to say that, but it was like, it was, when I was calling in the angel, I'm like, whoa, okay. Yeah, I'd never felt that before. I've never summoned angels before. So, hey, that was kind of cool. All right. Now, what I think I did was I brought that guy in so strong, and you even mentioned this in something that you wrote, or maybe it was a soundbite, Ari, but I called him in too strong, and I know Ball was like, whoa, 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 wait, a little bit too much angel in the room, okay? And so, but I was just so excited about that angelic energy, I just couldn't, I couldn't control myself, man. I'm sorry. But anyway.
All right. Jay gets into, and I'm switching between talking to Jay and talking to the audience, so bear with me. Jay gets into the methodology after this point. But before he does, I'd like to just say a few words about the angel being, and the angel's name again, as I said, is Vahaviel. Now, conventionally, the name is pronounced Vahuviel, but I've been working with it and I found a much more powerful vibration in rendering the name a little differently. At the same time, I don't know if I had said this, but the order of the Shem angels, let's just call them Shem angels because, Shemhamephorash is a little too much constantly to say. So the order of the Shem angels is the same one, but they angels are typically more male, yang, outgoing type. And male doesn't really cut it, but more externalized dynamics, luminous. The nighttime angels are more receptive and more into energy. So you have a greater focus on form. Let's put it this way. Remember when I said about the Eucharist, where you have the blood and the body? Well, consider that the body, the bread, is the day angel, and the blood is the night angel. The same thing with the Jinn. The day Jinn would be the bread, the consciousness, the body, the embodiment, the form of awareness, and then the nighttime would be the energy of awareness. Now, where do I come off saying that? If you look, all of this is based on how the tarot relate to the word portal. And they relate to it in the major arcana, the trumps, the 22 trumps that people have associated with the Hebrew letters. Now, these trumps many of them are situated in such a way that there's a central image between two pillars. You have the trump of justice, you have the trump of the high priestess, you have even the moon card, which has two pillars, not just an individual, but a pool of water with a crayfish coming out between two pillars, etc., etc. The Hierophant is another one, or the Pope. But the point is that the portal is essentially an entrance to the Temple of Solomon. And this is nowhere as strongly depicted as in the High Priestess card. And that is synchronistic here in the sense that the High Priestess is attributed to the sign of Cancer, and that this is the first, you have the Fool of the High Priestess as the first decan. So the Fool is also a beginner card, and the High Priestess represents the entrance into the Temple of Solomon, and the Temple of Solomon is an allegory for the human psychoenergetic system, the human psychic psychoenergetic form. It is, you might call it our aura, but it's beyond that. It's essentially something that's cultivated, that is one with the physical body and one with the consciousness, but it's also the bridge between the two. And it is the subject of cultivation in many, many systems. Many systems and belief systems of esoteric understanding have three worlds, three levels. Some have more, a lot of them, but most of them go down. You can boil it all down to awareness, mind, consciousness, energy, life force, and even mental energy, and then physicality, the bottom line material plane. What I'm getting at is that the symbolism of the high priestess is important. And in the entrance of the Temple of Solomon, and notice this card. I mean, and if you don't have a Rider-Waite tarot deck, because that has the most concise depiction of these symbols, just Google it online, the High Priestess trump. And you'll see a woman sitting in between two pillars. And these pillars are One of them is white and the other one is black. The white pillar, and this is also from Bible or from esoteric tradition, where the temple had two pillars. One of them said Yakin and the other one said Boz. And Yakin means he will establish, and Boz means with strength. So the white one is about establishing, it's about manifesting, it's about consciousness focusing something and grounding. And the other one is about life force. In India, they call it Purusha and Prakriti or Shiva Shakti. Shakti is the force, the feminine side, or the receptive side. In Taoism, it's yin and yang. Now, in this case, we have these two portals, and you notice the high priestess is not facing from the temple outward. She's facing into the temple. And you're looking at the high priestess, meaning that you are already in the temple. That's what it's trying to tell you. This temple isn't something outside of you, it is you. So your psychoenergetic form is this temple. And because it's your psychoenergetic form, you don't enter the temple. You are building the temple from the center. Imagine the workers being in the middle of the ground and then just building a house from within around them. And notice that the high priestess of the temple isn't guarding the entrance to protect you. She's not looking outside. She's looking to you to say, wake up. Wake up within your temple and empower it. Wake the temple up. Because behind the priestess, there is a veil. And this is the veil of Maya in Maya in tantric understanding, but it's essentially the force of nature. It is the veil of nature, but it is the veil of our nature as well, the veil of perception. So there are filters in awareness where the actual sense of the world is blocked from us. In meditative states, with certain substances, etc., in cultivation, this veil thins. You can see the unseen. So this is the veil to the unseen, and the veil to the unseen has a feminine texture to it. It is a feminine fertility energy, you might say, because it is the energy behind biology, behind evolution, behind life, etc. All the same thing. Now, the priestess looks within. So the priestess doesn't guard anything. She officiates the wisdom of the veil. And behind her, if you can peek in that image, you will see that you don't have a landscape, you have a seascape. There's water, and there's a flat horizon there. And this water is very interesting. Now, for two reasons. First, the priestess herself has a lunar crescent at her feet. So the priestess is associated with the moon, and that's why I associated with Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. Now, more importantly here, you look at the key of the Decan in terms of how we relate to it. To really open the portal, you need to master the minor arcana card wisdom. So, Jay, I know that, and I wrote that narrative because I didn't write a story again. It's essentially, I've been weaving the symbols together in a way that kind of makes sense and correlates one thing to another. So it's not just separate things. So you don't have to just meditate on it. Here, you can meditate on the narrative and it'll give you far more insight because you're meant to have experience already. You're not like, oh, I don't know about any of these symbols. I just do energy work or just meditate a little bit. You need to have a certain experience to be an initiate, so to speak. Initiates have certain preliminaries where they learn certain things, at least in the Hermetic tradition. So if you're a Hermetic initiate, you are aware of what these symbols mean to a certain degree, and then your deeper intuition, your subconscious, your higher mind, all of these things come into play and weave them together to reveal the truth that you already have innate within you. Instinctively, but this is an animal instinct. This is a higher level instinct. So when you look at this card, the high priestess is the officiator of your relationship with the world. And then the fool card comes in and says, okay, in this first decan, your relationship with the world is that of a newbie. of a fool. Not a fool as an idiot, but a fool as somebody who has the purity of awareness and whatever. They don't have experience. They lack wisdom because they don't have experience, but they also have the advantage of not having preconceptions. So it's good to be a fool in this sense, because the whole point is to release your preconceptions about any of this stuff. Oh, I read this book and I did that, and here's how I'm doing. This is my opinion. Well, if you're going to really open these portals, you're tuning into awareness states, you're tuning into energies, entities, however you want to call them, and you're tuning into symbols that are going to speak to you. And you need to learn to interpret them from a position of raw contact. And don't worry about anything being dangerous, because all of these things, I mean, even if paganism is down and dirty and cloven hoofed deities and this and that, this is Hermetic wisdom. Hermetic wisdom is Mediterranean based, and it comes from cultures that it's considered like high end paganism. It's the paganism of the educated. It's the paganism of the high priests, and it has to do with wisdom. Because if this was evil, societies would have collapsed way before they collapsed. They wouldn't be sustainable at all, and you wouldn't have wise people healing others and doing all kinds of things. You have the story of Apollonius of Tyana, which some say is pagan propaganda, but there's many such stories. You have many people. They're not just isolated in Palestine. They're all over the world. Sages, saints, holy people, just yogis, whatever, super shamans, people who did good and contributed not to the empire, but to the community, the small communities that they lived in, people around them, down to earth stuff. But Hermeticism goes even deeper than that, because it seeks to address cosmic level realities. It seeks to connect cosmic level existence with down to earth level existence, to bring them together, not so much fuse them, but to create a link, because that's our world too. This isn't just the world where we have our feet on and then above is a cap and forget about it. You don't have to just die and then go somewhere else. Everything coexists. You have a body, you have a really big advantage, because a physical body gravitates all the other bodies around you. It gravitates the mind, the spirit, the soul, the energy. Everything that existence is precipitates into a center that is physical, because that's what physicality does. It is meant to concentrate. Yes, it limits, but the reason that it limits is because it has to bring all of these things together to define. So in this state, Hermetic wisdom allows you to enter timeless symbols and bring them to life and apply them to your own practices, to your own expression, and also to be nourished by them. So we're looking at things in a healthy manner. I emphasize this a lot because we use a lot of words like good, evil, bad, this, that. But I just like to say, well, set those aside right now, because there's too much dissension about it. Not that I disagree with the terms per se, but there's so much dissension that, well, nobody can disagree with the word healthy. So is this healthy? Well, by their fruits you shall know them. So if you do things a certain way and you are sensitive to the signs if something is comfortable or uncomfortable, and how, because Jay goes through uncomfortable experiences, but a lot of these are learning experiences, or not just learning experiences, but adaptation experiences. Sometimes you have something malignant or negative or counterproductive inside of you, or uh, of you, so to speak, that isn't really you. It's an affliction. And when you confront it, yeah, you're uncomfortable. It hurts. And so the point is to be able to redeem it, to remedy, to either remove it if you have to, or transform it if you can. Because removing isn't a blanket thing. Removing, you can easily remove, oh, my liver bugs me, let's remove it. Oh, my heart bugs me, let's remove it. Well, maybe we can remove the affliction and keep the organ, or keep the psychic aspect of ourselves. In this case, we have something very interesting because one of the reasons why I'm enthusiastic about this approach is because of all the synchronicities that come together when you align the symbols a certain way. So there's 50 million ways to align tarot card symbols, to associate a symbol with a sign, a planet, um, to say this tarot card is that Hebrew letter, which is that planet, which is this color, and everything seems arbitrary. And in a way, well, there's no rules. What you do is combine the symbols in the most meaningful manner. When they align, something comes through. I don't mean an entity, but I mean it. They amplify each other. They complement each other in a way that is useful to what you're doing. And in this case, we look at the Two of Swords, which is the numbered card for this decan. And the Two of Swords has precisely almost the same background as the Priestess card. There's a woman who's blindfolded. She's holding two swords in a kind of X shape. And behind her, there's the same horizon of water, only this time there's rocks. Now, you don't see those rocks with the High Priestess card because it's got the veil. Once you bring down the veil, you go, oh, okay. Now I know this veil was actually protecting me from crashing into the rocks and dealing with the unseen. Usually, if you avoid it instinctively, that's not always the case because bad things do happen to normal people who don't have psychic insight. We call it fate. Oh, I was fated to crash. Well, you didn't see the rock and you crashed, okay? Maybe there are so many circumstantial variables here that, yeah, you couldn't deal with them. There's so much stuff. Sometimes that happens. Many times that happens. But for the most part, if you can see the rocks, you can avoid them. That's why one of the reasons we engage in these kinds of things, why people do divination, they don't do it just to know the future. The future is also variable. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, this is going to happen. And well, maybe, maybe not. If something is really something that is not in your best interest, and I don't mean your best immediate interest or your ego's interest or your comfort zone interest, I mean that if you're going to just crash and suffer just because, maybe you want to question that assessment. A lot of people like to promote prophecies, and some of these may be true in a sense, but many of them are manipulation or misapprehension or even projection. In this case, there are rocks. You start this system, you will start perceiving the rocks. And Jay has perceived the rocks synchronistically in certain negative events that recently happened in his life. The whole financial thing that he either talked about in the beginning or may talk about in the end. I can't remember. But all of this as if something is trying to stop you from doing this work at the same time. Now, yeah, there are celestial influences, there are cyclic influences, karmic influences, you might say, that put us in a period of history that is very sensitive and volatile. I'm not going to get into that. We do have a partial solar eclipse that is under certain astrological influences. I know I just mentioned don't listen to fate and all of this. I'm saying influences. So if you cultivate your discernment, if you cultivate the energy body, the subtle body, for example, you will be able to discern the quality of these influences. And if you do, you will realize as your awareness opens up a little bit more that you have choices. Remember the story of Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty had three fairy godmothers that came during her birthday or when she was born or her baptism, and they bestowed blessings. Well, the king and queen forgot to invite the fourth one. And she was pissed and came there and goes, I'm pissed at you and I'm going to make you all suffer. So she's going to die. And so the other fairy godmothers interceded and said, well, yeah, okay, that's a curse, and we can't do anything about it because, like us, she infused the structure of events, the flow of events to go in that direction. What we can do is put an additional influence that's going to modify it. So it's not going to be death. It's going to be everybody just falls asleep for 100 years and wakes up, and then everything will be fine. And nobody loses anything because everybody's going to be asleep at the same time and wake up at the same time as if nothing had happened. So things can be moderated. It's not perfect, but there is a point to engaging in these fluctuations, in the negative and the positive, and bringing it about again. And the point is, when you are afflicted, you need to lift yourself from your bootstraps to do something about it. So before, in all the fairy tales and the stories, the hero confronts the villain or whatever they need to confront, they need to train, they need to acquire allies, they need to learn things, they need to mature. There's a whole bunch of things that need to happen. And sometimes, being the lazy humans we are, is not going to happen unless we are kind of, poked a little bit for it to happen. Because you make a wish and you go, I want this, but I don't want to do anything to get it. And then it just falls in your lap and you don't even recognize it, or else you can't appreciate it. However, if you participate and use it as a means to grow, to become stronger, to become wiser, then not only will you appreciate it because you've essentially worked for it, but you will be in a greater capacity to enjoy it. You will be happier. And I don't mean work hard. See, everything is so exaggerated and abused in life. Some things need to be moderated, other things need to be amplified, other things need to be toned down. Well, what's what? Well, that's where discernment comes in. Again, we cultivate discernment for that reason. Every case is different. The only generalization you can make, and even that can't happen, is you can't generalize, but sometimes you can. But you need to know when, how, and for what purpose you can do that in each given case. So this is why I emphasize cultivation. It's not enlightenment or escape or to be some great being and all of that. Well and good, but it is to become more resourceful and more capable of fulfillment, to actually be able to absorb fulfillment. It's like taking vitamins, and sometimes you take all these vitamins, nothing happens. Why? Well, there's no absorption. Your body doesn't, it just rejects it for whatever reason. Sometimes you need to modify your diet. Sometimes you need a kind of psychological state for absorption to happen. Sometimes you need to exercise and get the blood flowing, et cetera, et cetera. There are modifications that may be needed to be able to absorb what we might call nutrients or blessings or anything good. So it's a little more complicated than some people think. And in this case, Jay, I'll reference you directly now. You need to look at the symbolism of the Two of Swords. This card has a woman who may also be a version of the priestess, only she's blindfolded. She's blindfolded because she's come out, her back is to the ocean, she's looking in again. It's almost like the veil has gone down and the priestess has taken a step back. Gone are her fancy robes. Now she's wearing a simple cloth. She can't see anymore. Her crown is gone. The moon is in the sky now. Now it's the world. Her power is the world. And you're facing the world. The power of the priestess is the power of the world. The priestess is the priestess of Gaia, the priestess of the world, the priestess of the unseen especially, because she's the priestess of the moon aspect. The moon ruling biology, feelings, deep energies, instincts, the feminine aspect. So the moon is in the sky here, and it's illuminating this ocean full of rocks, and the two swords represent the metal element. And again, I use Taoist symbolism here because it is more shamanic in nature and more down to earth, and it works with the organs better, so we're more tuned physically to what's going on in this hermetic system. And the virtue of the metal element, the virtue of the sword, is fortitude. It's courage. It's righteousness, and not moral ego righteousness, but a certain sense of standing upright and understanding what's healthy for you and the world and sustainable and right. That's what's right. Right doesn't mean I'm just an opinionated bastard doing whatever and impressing other people about it. Right means that your connection between the ground and the sky, between awareness, feelings, and sensation, all of these things are aligned and coherent and healthy. So fortitude is the strength you have to move through what you need to move through. Courage. You need courage. And you say, well, what's threatening me? Well, what's threatening you is those rocks. They're there and they're actually immobile. They're not moving out to get you, but you're moving toward them. They don't have the power to get you, but you're tethered to them because of habit, conditioning, a whole bunch of things. So these influences that are happening astrologically, for example, they stimulate us to become more aware by showing where the weak points are, where the strong points are, and challenging us to dig within and see what we can do about it. And in this case, I use symbols to help navigate the situation. So the fool of the high priestess is the beginner who is challenged to, without preconceptions, engage in the veil and balance the energies of consciousness and life force together through these entity interactions in order to open the veil. And the veil opens, and as the veil opens, you enter the unseen and can engage with the entities involved. And these entities teach you things. Now, the angel has many things that it can teach. And Jay, there's no reason why you shouldn't engage with the angel on its own merits. There are a lot of people that, shall we say, summon the angels, the Shem angels, just on their own. They don't summon them in this context. They start from the first degree in Aries. It's a different part of the zodiac, but they're usually always associated with the zodiac somehow and the decans. I find this more grounding because you're engaging the higher levels of consciousness where the angels are involved, although the Shem angels are grounded, more grounded than the archangels. The archangels, to me, are angels of humanity. So if you're aligned with the ideals of humanity, you can connect with them easier. The Shem angels are aligned with navigating through the Red Sea. In the book of Exodus, their names are actually derived from the protecting angel, the great angel, whatever it was, that protected the tribes of Israel as they left Egypt, which represents the former conditioned world, the limited world, the oppressive world, moving to the promised land of higher awareness and greater maturity and resourcefulness, and moving through the Sea of Reeds, which is also a boundary layer. And this boundary layer, the Red Sea, the sea, which is misnomered. It's not supposed to be the Red Sea. It's supposed to be the Reed Sea. But this misnomer, again, leads us back to another realization because the Hebrew word for red is the word Adam, blood. DM, dam, is the word for blood. Adam is Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which corresponds to the fool again. See how these symbols interweave through association. So you have an enlivening spark of the blood. Your blood animates. Again, go back to the Eucharist, the blood of Christ, for example. You have your life force. This is a sea of life force. This is a sea of energy. You navigate through these energies, in other words, to cross them to a better state, to a healthier, more integral state. And so you're taking your first step. This is an initiation. And as you move through the initiation, you cultivate fortitude. That's the virtue. The challenge is a sense of loss or a feeling that you will lose. Something will be taken away from you. Grief, sadness, despair, losing hope. All of these things are struggling to undermine you because that is where things aren't moving right. When your lungs aren't functioning right, your emotions go into grief, despair. If you go into grief, despair a lot, your lungs won't function right. There is medical evidence that lung cancer, for example, is associated with chronic grief. So these things aren't pie in the sky. They may not be, oh, the white lab coat people haven't proved it. Yeah, well, let's leave those guys aside. So what we want here is to make associations that work for us. So Jay, look at this imagery. You have a woman with a blindfold. She is trying to balance two swords, and this card generally means that you're walking a tightrope. It may not be that dramatic, but you're balancing two forces that are veering in one direction or another. You do too much, you're going to fall one way. You do too little, you're going to fall another way. Too much emphasis on the angel, then the Jinn summers. Too much emphasis on the Jinn, you won't be able to feel the angel. And Vahuval, or Vahaval, has very similar qualities to Baal. Vahaval essentially forms a network. If you just look at the three letters outside of the L part, which means of the divine, of God, um, the Vav, He, Vav, the three letters, or VHV in English or Latin, essentially translate as connecting life to something. So two connectors and then the life in between, the joy of life, the meaning of life, the life force coming through the breath. This is connected in one direction to something, and it's connected through the other direction to something else. So it's almost like a junction. And Baal has 66 legions. And again, if you look at it geometrically, which is Hebrew numerology, you will see that 66 is the number of connecting networks, basically Vav and Samek. Again, 666 is not an evil number into itself. It simply describes an interconnected network dynamic. It simply describes a matrix. And matrices are not necessarily full of illusion or, forget the movie here. That's one matrix. That's one name. Matrix means womb. Every woman has one. And matrix is nature. And it's not a simulation in the way technology or tech considers a simulation. It's a creation. You can call it any creation, call it a simulation. But a simulation typically is something that is really something else. It simulates something. It's a copy of something. But nature is evolving, so it's not a definitive thing. It's a dynamic. And in this case, Baal connects to a network or is networks in the sense of connecting to your own internal energy matrix. It's an alchemical type of Jinn. If you look at what Baal does, Baal essentially opens you up to the unseen. It makes you invisible, but that can be interpreted in terms of making you experience the invisible. If you look at it from the Latin, for example, making you more sensitive to the invisible and thus making you able to immerse yourself into the unseen, and thus it becomes a part of you. Essentially, your energy body resonates with the unseen energy, and that can lead to a state where somebody else can't perceive you because you're the unseen as well. They will not notice you. You may be there, but because materially you don't disappear, but you're outside of the realm of their conscious attention. Similarly, there's more to Baal. If you look at other versions outside of the Lesser Key of Solomon, where like the Pseudo Monarchia Demonum list of 69 Jinn, not 72, the Lesser Key of Solomon added a few more, took out one. So most of the spirits, however, are in the Pseudomonarchium Demonum. And by Johann Wehr, he didn't author it. He copied it from another grimoire. And I won't get into that. You can look all that up. However, the important thing is that Baal is the initiator. He has three heads, three intelligences, three ways of being. The fire intelligence represented by a cat, the water intelligence represented by a frog, and the air intelligence represented by a human being between them. you see the same orientation in the Sefer Yetzirah. It talks about three mother letters of the Hebrew alphabet. One is associated with fire, and that's usually around the head, the top area. The other one with water associated with the belly, and the third one with air associated with the chest area, where we breathe in our heart. And the air moderates the other two. So we're talking about a form of alchemy here. And when you summon Baal, Baal isn't going to just pop up and say, "Hey, I'm Baal, how you doing? And we're going to do things." Well, what are you going to do? Because first, for Baal to appear, what you need to do is visualize in a state of deep concentration, visualize to the point that you actually feel the life of this entity, that this is an entity. You can think whatever you want about it before and after, but when you do summon, you visualize all of these attributes of Baal looking like a three-headed thing, or maybe the heads are in a vertical like a totem pole. Doesn't mean that one is to the left and one is to the right. That's not what the text necessarily says. It's just that the middle head is the human one. So you need to create an interaction, a cultivation interaction between the water and fire elements. This will trigger Baal's ability when you do that. And the Latin translation says that Baal, he favors the disputer. Who's the disputer? Well, he's the one that questions things, that questions traditions, questions the consensus. And the consensus is that according to Kabbalah, that the fire element goes in the head, the water element goes in the belly, and the air elements in between them. So what happens when you question the consensus? Well, you reverse it. So you're bringing the water element to the head, lowering the fire element to the belly, and then the fire naturally rises and kind of cooks through the air element. You create steam. This is a Taoist practice. Now, if one of them is to the left and the other one is to the right, the fire and water, you reverse them. And you create, you kind of balance it out because you're meant to merge these two elements. And this is what Indian yoga does and Tantra. You take the element of the left pathway and the right pathway, or the energies, and you merge them into the middle pathway. These are very similar symbolic dynamics. So which one is it? Who knows? For sure. There you would have to have a kind of oral tradition to support you, but we don't. But we do know that the inversion of these elemental dynamics works in both cases. We also know that Tantra also says that the inhale energy that goes down is called prana. The exhale energy, which is connected to the lower body, elimination, sexuality, urination, all of that, is called apana. And that if you want to stimulate your central meridian, so to speak, your spinal axis, you reverse their flows. You take the lower energies, the energies of the lower body, bring them to the upper body, and then you take the higher energies and breathe them into the lower body. And then they come back together and create an alchemical transmutation in the process. So your sensations play around, and these sensations alter your state of awareness and fuse it with your life force. Baal is giving you all of this. And yeah, am I reading into it? Of course I am, but that's what the symbolism is for. Because if you are an initiate, you know certain fundamentals. See, this wasn't written for people off the street. These are grimoires, are basically notebooks of occultists. And most of these occultists later on, they had no clue about this stuff. But if you look back to who the hell came up with this guy Baal in the first place, and who the hell described him in this manner and why? So I'm saying this for the following reason. And this reason will be explained after Jay's next little interlude, because he kind of gets into it. So Jay, read that myth or story or narrative about the minor arcana card, because that gives you a certain, shall we say, it's an instruction book on how to navigate and how to address and what your attitude needs to be for this decan. All right. What else you got to say?
So that fell flat, although I did kind of, I wrote the angel's name around a circle. I placed Baal's sigil in the circle. I did my best to do what you said to do, and then I even drew Baal's sigil in the circle that I drew previously of the angel, but I mean, okay, none of that really worked. All right. So I'm like, all right. So today, lots of things really went wrong today. So I think they're just outside forces that just want me to fail. Because there are just so many things going wrong today, and I'm super not happy about it, and in life in general, and it's not that I no longer feel bad anymore, it's just actual bad things are happening. But again, I'm not too terribly concerned about them, but they are in front of me, those things. Financial problems and other stuff. Or potential financial problems. I lost a company class, and so they pay a lot, and so when you lose them, it matters. And so I don't know, I don't know what I'm going to do, but whatever. So, but also lots of little things. Getting locked out of the house so I can't get my coffee cup to go over to this gas station to get some coffee to start off my morning, because I can't get into the house to make coffee because I'm locked out of the house. And I'm like, all right, there's a few too many wrong things to happen right in a row. But again, I go into this fusion alchemy this morning in the 9 cuts, and I summon in the archangels, who came in not so strong today. Not that they were weak. I could still feel them. But again, back to that original question, what do you think's actually happening here? Am I, when I take time off, I come back, I'm a little better, or am I just kind of getting used to it? It's a confusing thing, but again, they're there. So are the rulers. Everything's cool.
In a nutshell, what's happening, Jay, is that you've opened the portal, but you haven't integrated its energy yet. This is why this work isn't something that you can just, okay, let's do it on Tuesday and then we'll get back on Friday again. Because if you leave it in the middle, and occultists usually go through they prepare, they do all these things, and you do all that, and then after they're done, they do a closure. Some people do a kind of banishing ritual where they clean the atmosphere and all of that. You don't really need to do that with this system. Part of the cultivation is the understanding of what this portal represents. Now, you bring the archangels and the rulers and all of that into the picture, you will be protected from the major stuff. You may experience fear, you may experience discomfort, little things may happen, but these little upsets would have happened anyways in your life, but they would never have a context. Now they're organized into a purpose, and that purpose is your own strengthening. And this is where the treasures of Jinn alchemy or Solomonic alchemy come in. What happens is that you've opened the portal, and the nature of the portal is your inexperienced self dealing with what happens when the veil of the high priestess is removed and you're exposed to the unseen world, which directly ties into your subconscious. Now, it always does, but again, our ignorance protects us sometimes. The fool doesn't begin his journey, for example, or her journey, until it is done consciously. So you can be a fool or a beginner or whatever all your life and not encounter too many adversities, or you may encounter a lot of adversities, but that would be your so-called lot in life, as they would say. But once you begin a journey like this, then the card of the fool shows you that he's taken one more step, he's going to go over the cliff. And there's a little dog barking at his feet, the little voice of his existing instinct that tells him, hey, watch out. But the fool's looking up at the stars, at the sky, at the sun. He's looking up into his or her ideals. and what can happen, the dreams and all of the dreams of life. And then the high priestess looks within toward the individual who is the fool and essentially stands in front of a veil and officiates the relationship between the inner being or who you are and yourself and the world. So this veil comes down and you can see beyond into the ocean. But look, your first step isn't one of vision. Now you notice that the high priestess can't tell you anything. Your deeper intuition that she represents doesn't speak to you directly because she's blindfolded, because she's learning to balance out these various conflicting forces in life. The metal element, the sword, represents a kind of mental will. It represents where energy's ground. Metal is a conductor of electricity. Electricity represents life in a certain sense, and metal conducts heat. The fire element also represents spirit and soul in esoteric thinking. And so metal conducts all of this. And metal, when forged into a sword, can also cut. It separates, it discerns. Now, there are these forces that have these qualities, and you require fortitude, courage, and a certain sense of righteousness, but not in an overbearing manner. That word doesn't mean being a prick, it means being a human being that has a certain amount of integrity, as much as you can muster, and principles, and can stand up straight and hold their head not high looking at the sky so they keep stumbling, but straight ahead with just enough vision underneath to know to be able to avoid obstacles. And there are obstacles, and you bump into them now at this stage. So the high priest, the Two of Swords, is telling you that balance is the key here, and it's not something that I can instruct you directly in doing. Balance, do this, tweak that, do the other. It's more of how you fine tune it. So, yes, you need regularity at this stage. When you open the portal and you're exposed to the dynamics of a given portal, a decan portal, then all of the other dynamics are going to come into play, regulating your life force. You're keeping up your protection, your general state of integrity with the archangel ruler dynamic. Nothing really bad is going to happen, but it's going to be uncomfortable until you can integrate the portal. Now, all portals are not the same. If you look at the minor arcana, the numbered cards of the tarot, the ones with the images on them, the decks that have images, because those are better to read, the Rider-Waite decks. These decks show some cards are better than others. Some cards show like having a good time. Some cards show love. Some cards show despair, being stabbed by swords. Swords are probably the most difficult element here because they're the ones that mean business. They're instruments of violence. And there's no coincidence that this metal sword element, this emblem, this suit, is associated with the east and the forward direction, because you need to be facing these things. You can't have them come from blindsiding you from either side or behind you. So behind you is the most benign of the emblems or the suits, which is the cups. I mean, at most with the cups, you can be delusional, you can be depressed, but you can be sad, whatever, but or fearful. But the cups they're not a real overt threat. The wands may have oppressive energy, but again, they also represent courage. They represent meeting things head on as well. But even with the wands or the pentacles, which can, in the worst case, mean poverty, or something that's not coming into fruition as fast as you would like it to come into fruition. But the swords basically have the most apparently negative interpretations associated with them. So those are very challenging portals. And these portals, in this case, you're coming into taking your first step. And that first step can be a doozy. So when you're dealing with this first portal, learning the ropes, as it were, because after you learn the ropes here, you'll be able to apply it much easier in the other ones. There will also be challenges, but this one says, look, don't stop until you get the hang of it. Not just with this Jinn, because your portal is also half open. You haven't correlated the second pillar yet. So you got one pillar holding the portal up. It's almost like the veil behind the priestess has partially fallen. So you have one foot in the Two of Swords and one foot still inside your own temple or in the past. One foot in the past and the other foot in what this system promises. So in this case, you're working at your own pace, but that pace needs to be a little fine tuned and regulated, because if you just leave it now, then you might keep bumping into more rocks along the way because you're blindfolded. And you're going to be blindfolded in this step because the blindfold drops with the other portals, with the continuing progression. Right now, you need to sustain. You don't have to like see where you're going, but you need to feel it. So you're developing a certain intuitive sense to be able to feel the energies, but they don't need to be world shattering. They don't need to be highly dramatic. They can easily be subtle and effective. That's why when you did your divination, your 8-ball thing, it said, well, it's open, and the Jinn also said, hey, you've opened the portal. Yeah. But opening the portal doesn't mean you get a blast of energy and it's all profound. It means that now you're exposed to something. And this something is the challenge of navigating the subconscious domain, which now has a light shine in it. Now you're actually perceiving it, even though the rational mind can't quite interpret it yet. The signs and importance and all of this. So, yeah, there are always forces that don't want you to evolve. They are at every level. And remember, this system tunes you to the human collective, level 3. And the human collective is the most challenging level of all. The first level is just your personal stuff. Psychology deals with it. So, and there's a whole bunch of things people can do. The second level deals with how you relate to others, and you're open to the unseen, but at a very limited scope. It's not the whole human collective. It could be your family, your friends, your immediate environment. And so many people involved in occultism or religion, even their own philosophies, their own worldviews, their coping mechanisms, they can be relatively healthy psychologically, but still encounter the challenges of life and go, yeah, okay, I do what I do and I deal with them to the best of my ability. And then the world goes upside down and it seems like there's events that you can't control or that are beyond you. Well, this level connects you to that. So you don't have the meteor falling on your head. So you don't stand in front of the crack in the earth when the earthquake happens, or if it's going to happen when you're there. You're at the right place at the right time, regardless of what so-called the greater forces, which have their own reasons for happening, occur. And if there are people doing powerful rituals and they're evil, it's not going to affect you. And if you are engaged in level 3, you are going to be an influence. There's an amplifier going on here. So it's not just that little tiny you is engaged in the human collective and you're slipping through the cracks. That happens, and it happens for a while. But eventually, you'll be able to handle these greater energies. This isn't like a promise for everybody. And that's why progress is gradual. You rarely get, from doing this kind of thing, you rarely get challenges greater than you can handle. That you have to really, really deny what's going on. You have to be blind. You have to be completely delusional or deluded. And many people are. And some people make mistakes in order to learn from them, so they're not delusional. But when you engage in these kinds of things, if your heart's in the right place and if your mind is stable, more likely than not, because there can be no guarantees on anything. Oh, you just said, but well, I don't know what the situation of every single person is. That's why this is something for adults, because adults make their own responsible choices. So, in all of this, you are engaging with this portal. So, you keep doing it until you can um, manifest Baal. And I'm going to get into that right now because the whole point is that the triangle and the circle, I think I've said this also, I mentioned about it in the previous podcast, number 22, that it's normally a ritual item and you actually have a real triangle, a triangular form with a circle that is usually a blackened mirror. And you look into it and you get into an altered state and you summon the jinn and see it in the circle. Well, we can take this from a directly hermetic allegorical perspective and say, okay, well, look at it this way. The triangle and the circle is really a manifestation of your mental access, your third eye, as it were. So the triangle is something you imagine. And around the periphery of the triangle, you understand that what it represents is that this is the triangle of my body, that it is divinely structured. That's why my own access to the Elohim Hayim that we talked about when you bring the archangels. I mean, the archangels don't come in a vacuum. They come from a divine source, so to speak. And this source is part of all of this. This is not black magic. It's not white magic. This is not even in between magic. This is the whole spectrum comes in because it opens you up to everything in a responsible manner. This is adult magic, responsible adult magic, responsible adult cultivation and esotericism. So this isn't for kids and this isn't for teenagers. You can learn about it and you can like deal with the angels because it's a whole, and even that can be stressful. You can cultivate, you can do a whole number of preparatory things, and you can play with it even to a certain point. But once you start getting serious, and these entities will not really respond to you if you're not ready for them. That's one thing about this kind of agreement that I got in correlating all of this and in interacting with all of this, that it's not a blind thing, a mechanical thing. It doesn't have its own agenda. The agenda is really clear because every single influence here benefits from human evolution. And human evolution benefits from the presence of every single thing. So the relationship is symbiotic. You don't have to sacrifice to anything. You don't have to make offerings because it's already there. Your offering is your commitment, your mature commitment. So if you're just doing this in an immature manner, it's not going to respond to you. That's the worst that can happen. And but Jay, you can see that it is responding to you. There are events going on in your life that are synchronistic, and synchronicity or coincidence, or how these things work, that is the hallmark of esoteric engagement. Before you see anything, before you feel anything, even you have the way events flow starts altering or moving in a pattern that correlates with what you're dealing with. And that's why these symbols all interconnect with events and everything. So this is a living practice. It's not something that I did steps 1, 2, 3, and then I get results 4, 5, 6. This is not a menu type thing. If you're that simplistic, then you don't have the sophistication, so to speak, and that's not a criticism. It's an observation of, if you really say, well, I don't have the sophistication for this. Well, then can I do something simpler or something along different lines, or can I approach it up to a certain point? Can I, for example, summon just the angels without the circle, without anything, one at a time, or even just the archangels, or can I just summon the jinn here and there to get to know them? Because if your heart's in the right place, they're not going to attack you. They know that, okay, this is a candidate for something serious. And but I wouldn't do it ritualistically. And most occultists will tell you, well, then that's a head trip. Then it's all in your head. Well, no, it's much more diluted of an experience. Nothing is harming you. This is all, it may seem to be in your head, but that's where you need it to be. because anything else might be a little too much. So moving on, engage with this as much as you can, regulating it in a regular manner. Like you don't have to do it every day, but if you do it like twice a week, set certain times that you're going to do it and say, okay, I'm going to do it then. That alerts everything involved, good and bad, to align with your decision. And that way, you're going to face whatever needs to be faced. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that something is going to get you. Your determination and fortitude, that's another thing. When you're dealing with the swords, fortitude is a virtue, which means virtue means strength, which means that this is your resource. It's a state and an energy that is connected to this emblem and is connected to the Archangel Michael and is connected to the Orients, the ruler of the East, that is connected to the scarab that pushes the sun up the horizon into the zenith, in Egyptian mythology, Kepher. And all of these things contribute to this energy known as fortitude. Courageous people are like, well, we're not fearless. We just, courage is the antidote to fear. It gets us through fear, so the fear doesn't have to inundate us. So when you're courageous, you don't just scream blindly in terror. That's not courage. That's just ignoring the fear and moving ahead. This is an energy of confidence in your own purpose, of confidence in your own resourcefulness, of confidence in the divine, of confidence in the true nature, the deeper nature of the world itself. So as you deal with this, these events are going to modulate. And if you are like, well, it's going to take me time to summon these two guys to Baal, Agaris, and their angels and integrate them in all of this, and that is true. That's why you got the archangels. If you feel that, okay, there's too many rocks ahead in all of this and things seem to be against me, well, this is why you have the archangels and the rulers. They have an earth-sky connection that creates a kind of filter that is beyond the confines of your so-called temple and gives you enough space in the world to act. They're there for that reason. That's one of the reasons, at least. It's not just the angels themselves alone that protect you. The angels will infuse the pillars or the rulers. So the rulers are not some unconscious demonic force or something like that. And they're not blind forces of nature, because the higher consciousness of the archangels puts you in a level 3 context so you can navigate it. I mean, technically, you can take away the you need the emblems, the aces, in order to move through the system, but you also need them to kind of bond the archangels and the rulers together. But if you have all that, the 9 cuts, which I don't really formally do with the system, but that's your choice and that's okay. The 9 cuts, the fusion alchemy, which I do think is some form of it is very, very helpful. And all of this, the 4-quarter protectors or rulers and archangels and stuff will help you deal with things. Now, again, like you said, the angels themselves, of the Shem angels, are much denser because they're more specific. They're more down to earth. They're zodiac celestial oriented, but as you relate them to the Jinn, they also come into greater intensity. So imagine, like, this experience you had of this angel here, this Vahavel, and imagine there are 71 more of these guys. And imagine summoning them all at the same time. That's a little too much to handle. Even 8 of them at the same time, which is supposed to be what we're going to do at this level. 8 Jinn and 8 of these angelic beings, all at the same time, 4 portals open, washing you with whatever they represent, and you being able to maintain a balance within that. And as they interact and flood you with what they represent through the medium of what the Jinn and the archangels and the angels represent, you will be taught things. you will be able to modulate your energy to a level that will give you both certain abilities and the ability to navigate level 3, most of all, as you are able to handle it. And you can handle a lot, and that's why the system is a little stricter with you, but it's not going to throw you under the bus. So, what you do here is uh, deal with that triangle and circle in a different, slightly different way, because every Jinn has an image that is a bunch of parts fit together. Like Baal has the 3 heads, and Agaris is an old guy sitting on a crocodile with a bird in his hand, etc., etc. And these images are meant to be subjects of contemplation. That's what you look at in your third eye. You image the Jinn, and you focus on it, and you focus on it until you get a sense of the energy. The energy doesn't come as you open some door and summon it, and then it just walks through. You you create a magnetizing effect through focusing the symbols in one place, that circle. And around that circle is the angelic influence, which balances that dynamic of the Jinn coming together, the elements of the Jinn being pulled out of the ethers and forming a single coherent presence. And around that presence, you have the higher consciousness of the angel, which keeps its integrity. The triangle is your affirmation that you are the Temple of Solomon, in that sense, that your subtle body is a Temple of Solomon aligned with the divine, with evolution, with the cosmos, with everything that's real. Now, this isn't a Christian system, although Christians have kind of co-opted it. And it's not a Hebrew system either. The roots of it, at least, are shamanic. On the other hand, it has been structured through the lesser key of Solomon, so it is Kabbalistic. And thus all the symbolism is Kabbalistic, and thus it relates to angels, to the 4-letter name of God, to Jinn as spirits that are lower in the scale, so to speak, of evolution, closer to physicality than angels are, but they're not necessarily evil. And then you had other influences that distort the thing. Ignorance, purposeful misinformation, anything. And this is all being cleared out, although you don't have that kind of baggage for the most part. However, what you do have is a lack of experience with putting all of these things together. You've done, I mean, Jay has summoned most every single Jinn here at one time or another, and in some way related to them, even if a little bit. Now, he hasn't been able to open up portals before. He hasn't related to angels and archangels before. And he hasn't even included the rulers in the situation, let alone tarot cards and suits and stuff like that. So this is practically a new thing. So the Fool card does fit here. At the same time, you can summon the angel, and the angel goes around the circle. The angel doesn't need to have form, but you can summon it as a form, and then you dissolve it and make the golden electric light, but denser, darker, as you say, to go around the circle. And then the triangle itself, which ritualistically ceremonially has words around it. But these words, if you really look into the translation and reconstitute them, they basically are an affirmation that you are dedicating your subtle body, your energy body, to the divine essence. And the angel of the day side is an angel of consciousness more, of angel of formation, like the body, the bread of Christ. And the angel of the night side is an angel of life force more. So, and I'm not going to get into like the names of God and stuff that explain this directly. That's too much, and we'd be going on for hours. Already this has gone pretty long. This is like in itself just a half hour. So I'm going to leave it at this. Just go back and look at the minor arcana card and regulate the situation so you can have a little bit of, find that balance point between the angel and the Jinn, but know that you haven't yet constituted the Jinn as it's supposed to be. Where at the center of the circle, that's where the Jinn appears within your mind's eye, and you contemplate the form until you start feeling the energy, until the angel can actually infuse the center circle with its own energy. And that can translate, because we're talking about an angel that's a day angel for a day Jinn. In that sense, they're compatible. And then you have a night angel for the night Jinn. And in that sense, they're compatible. And then with that influence, the angel can acquire human form. The human form is bestowed by you and the angel. But the angel part is usually left unsaid in the system, but it's used by others. But still, the system does say Shemhamephorash, and Shemhamephorash is angels, not Jinn. It's almost like, well, if you know this stuff, if you're a Renaissance occultist or if you're a Kabbalist, and this is probably aimed toward Kabbalists, then you should be able to get it. Because this kind of thing, a lot of these writings, whether they're popular or not, they're not meant for the general public. They're meant for people in the know. And so these podcasts are giving you a little bit of that know. And Jay is working with that know, and his results come accordingly. He's made great progress, but there's, and it's a good thing he hasn't succeeded completely, because then I would have nothing to say in that sense. But still, if he had succeeded completely, then things would have been a lot simpler, and people probably would have been doing this on their own. And I think I'm the only one here doing it in quite this manner, which doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it's not easy to interpret it that way, because a lot of things have been distorted. But hey, a lot of esoteric information sometimes takes one person to point out a few things, and then others take it from there. But still, there's a lot of ground to cover. This is not a highly complex system, but it's highly contained. So there's a lot of stuff that it has, but once you get the hang of it, it's really not that difficult. For me, it's a hell of a lot easier than doing the ritual, that's for sure. Okay, I'll leave it at that and see if there's anything left with what else Jay has to say.
The portal was open because the genie was there and everything was cool. All right. And then I tried to bring in Ball, and I could kind of feel a little something this time. Maybe I felt a little something last time too, but maybe I felt a little more. And I really focused on trying to keep that Shemhamephorash angel gentle, soft. Don't bring them in so strong. And kind of, mix that energy in a ring around Ball, and kind of mix that and then take that into my body. And slowly I tried to, because I knew what to expect. Everything's cool, so the second time around I can do it with a little more finesse. But again, it fell flat. But hey, I have made progress, so I am happy. But you had mentioned something about a triangle. Now I'm going to go back and reread the 3 documents that you sent me, because maybe I missed something. I doubt it, because I read them slow. I didn't even read them, I studied them. That was actually one of the reasons why I took such a long break, is because I wanted to get this right. But I'm going to go over those again. But you mentioned something about a triangle. But at this point, anyway, where I'm at is I've got that Shemhamephorash angel. Where the hell is Ball? How do I mix the energies? And you mentioned ask the angel. And I did yesterday, and I was getting kind of the answers that I just talked about. Go into it with a little more finesse, and don't bring in the angels so strong. And ever since this morning, I haven't bothered to contact anything. I've just been thinking about other things. But I will, and I'll ask, and I'm going to send this soundbite to you tomorrow, and I'll have a chance to sleep on things and see what the angel says as well. And then there you go, man. So, I mean, I know everybody else is probably listening to this going, okay, failure again. Not me, though. I mean, because like I said, summoning angels is still a very new thing for me. When I do it properly, I'm like, yeah. So I feel pretty good. That's it. That's all I can think to say. Dr. J out.
Okay, Jay, thank you for the very informative exposition. And I think I've said everything I have to say. The finesse the angel talked about, I think I expressed what that is in the previous segment. If you don't get it, just listen to the thing again, take notes, and you did good to study the stuff. It should be studied. You don't just read over or gloss over it. And do it again. And the next time you'll do it, you'll see a difference, especially if you understand that bio isn't coming out as is. You know, if you do that, you're just going to get a regular effect. Right now, what you want is to infuse these energies into the events of your life so they start making a difference. Where you'll feel it, you might feel profound or not so profound, but the thing is, you'll be able to understand the art of it. Once you understand the art of it and start practicing the art, then the angel itself will work with the jinn, and the jinn will be able to constitute itself to come precipitate into being through that circle in the triangle. And from there on in, then you can turn the jinn into human form so it can familiarize with you. It can become your familiar. Unless it becomes familiarized, which is what human form means, compatible, it can't ground into your situation. It can't really actualize itself. A lot of people, the ritual that people do encompasses these same principles in a different manner, but it does so without conscious participation. You're not embodying the ritual into your own practice as something that transforms you. You're engaging with the symbols from the outside, and so you manifest something that doesn't really have direct contact with you. It's kept separate, and sometimes they use the circle as a barrier, which you're not supposed to. It's the circle itself that represents, or the Ring of Solomon, or the Zodiac Circle, all of these things. It represents your domain of transformation and the world's transformation, because this is where you and the world blend. The energy body isn't just you. It's also where the windows of the temple are open, the doors are open, the veil comes down, and the portals are open. That means the energies of the world flow through you, and your energies flow out into the world. You are engaging directly, and the world is directly engaging with you. I think I've said enough, maybe too much. So without any delay or further ado, again, please check out my playlists. Aside from this podcast, there's also the playlist about the occult stuff, my work on yoga, and that has taken a turn of a more advanced type of quality where I'm giving interpretations that you may not see from other sources, that I believe touch upon issues that may not be quite emphasized. So I've been talking about energy work, but now this next YouTube video is going to be about sensory reverse engineering the senses. That's the word that I believe is best translates this Sanskrit word called pratyahara from yoga. But aside from that, my Substack articles aren't just about occultism. They're also general commentary, the philosophy of that weaves occultism into the world. There's an article about the looking glass that has to do with the effects of mirroring, and I'm going to take that into engaging with artificial intelligence, and there's going to be other topics along similar lines. So I'm kind of expanding the whole dynamic. That would be acgeorge.substack.com and Substack. And the others are on YouTube. So thank you for listening. Sorry again for the extended blah blah. And until next time, Magus out.